Today, we're going to work on adding voice with words and phrases to our writing. What is voice? Voice is your unique style, personality, or point of view in your writing. It makes your writing more interesting. So your reader is not reading a list of facts that you've put into paragraph form, but they're reading it in an interesting way, and it's keeping them engaged in your writing. So how do we add voice to our writing? It can be something that we use to revise our writing to make it better, or we can begin by writing voice. And we're going to try to do both of these things today. First, we're going to think about what voice do we want to share with our reader. How do you want to sound through your writing? Sometimes you might have a voice that's humorous. Sometimes if your topic is very serious, the voice that comes through is serious. Maybe you want your voice to sound friendly. All of these could be voice in your writing. Remember, your voice should never change the information that you are giving to your reader. It should only make the way it sounds more interesting. Please be very careful of this while you're working on voice in your writing. Okay, so we're going to try this together with a small fact that I found about penguins that I thought was really interesting. I learned that all 17 species of penguins are found exclusively in the southern hemisphere. Now, I took this fact right from the text, and I'm going to use voice to maybe change the writing a little bit. Not the information, but the writing and how it sounds. So if I look at what's really important in this sentence, I'm reading that there's 17 species of penguins, and they are found exclusively in the southern hemisphere. And I know that exclusively means only in the southern hemisphere, obviously unless they are brought to other places. So to me, this is surprising. This was surprising when I first read it, because I think of penguins as being in other places that maybe are cold besides places in the southern hemisphere. So thinking about that and the fact that it was surprising to me, I think I want to use the phrase, believe it or not. That's going to make my writing, I think, sound a little friendlier, and it's showing that it is a shocking fact, something that I didn't know. So let's look at how I can change that. Instead of saying all 17 species, I'm going to tell my reader that there are 17 species of penguins, and believe it or not, they are, instead of using exclusively, because that's not a word that I usually use in my everyday language, I'm going to say they're all found in the southern hemisphere. Because I think both of those things are important. I've taken all the things that I've underlined, and I've reworded the sentence to say the same information in a different way, but I've also added my voice that I feel makes my writing a little bit more friendly, believe it or not. I'm going to use the same fact, only I'm going to do it a little differently, because you can add voice in so many different ways. This one I almost want to make a little bit funnier, maybe put a little bit of humor in it. So I'm thinking back to the idea of southern hemisphere. That's not where we live. We're in the northern hemisphere. So I want to point that out in my sentence when I'm talking about the penguins. So watch how I reword this. I'm going to start it the same way. I'm going to type it this time. So I'm going to use the same beginning. All 17 species of penguins are found in the southern hemisphere. Again, I'm going to take out exclusively because it's not a word that I usually use, so I'm not going to put it in my writing. All 17 species of penguins are found in the southern hemisphere. So, do not expect to see one walking around your town. Can you tell what part of this I'm adding to use my voice? Why don't you pause the video and write that down? Hopefully you realize that the part I added, do not expect to see one walking around your town, was where I tried to add voice to that sentence. And the reason I added that is because saying to my reader or my listener, your town, is like saying that I know you live in the northern hemisphere. But you should not expect to see penguins because they're in the southern hemisphere. Also, we know that no matter where we live, they wouldn't be walking around town anyway. And that's where I added a little bit of a humorous voice to my sentence. Let's try one more. So I'm back to the same fact, thinking about all 17 species, they're all in the southern hemisphere. Now I said to you before, I think of the word penguins, and I think of them being in cold places. So I ask myself, okay, what is a cold place that is in the northern hemisphere that people might think penguins live? And the first thing that came to my mind was Alaska. I think people might think penguins live there. So I'm going to ask a question to my reader, and then I'm going to answer it by showing them that they may think one thing, but I'm going to try to show this fact by proving their idea is wrong. So again, I'm going to start it the same way as before. Only I'm going to stop my sentence there. I keep doing that, sorry. There are 17 species of penguins. Now I'm going to ask the question. Will you find them walking around Alaska? Now back to what I know from my beginning fact, I know the answer is no. They're never going to be in Alaska because Alaska is in the northern hemisphere. So my answer is going to be nope. And I like that word even better than no. I think it sounds a little more fun. So will you find them walking around Alaska? Nope. Because all 17 species are found only in the southern hemisphere. And the reason I'm using only, again, I know I've said this many times, is because exclusively I think is not a word that I would use, so I don't want to put it in my own writing. So if you want to try to rewrite this sentence into maybe 1 or 2 or even 3, because sometimes adding voice, or even 4, adding voice to your writing can mean making it a little longer, and that's okay. So if you want to try it with this fact, or I have another penguin fact for you, you can try it with this one as well. Not that one. This one. Even though they do not have visible ears, penguins have excellent hearing. So you can choose either the one about the southern hemisphere or the ears and try to write rewrite this fact using voice. Why don't you pause the video and give that a try? If you want to try both, do that as well. Okay, that was us using voice to begin our writing piece. Sometimes, though, we already have something written and we need to go back and add voice to it. And that can be really tricky. Let's take a look at my paragraph that I have about the Lenape Native Americans and see what are some ways that I can add voice to this. There were many Native American tribes in America. The Lenape were Native Americans who lived in New Jersey. They lived there before the European explorers came. The Lenape had their own language, traditions, and customs. They used natural resources to survive. They lived in tribes. The tribes were large. All Lenape needed the land to survive. So I hope as you're reading this, you're noticing it does seem like a list of facts. And if I compare it to the sentences that I just added voice in, it's not as interesting. So let's take a look at some ways that we can do this. I'm noticing that when I first start talking about the Native Americans, the Lenape, I know from social studies that they came here a very long time ago. 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago. So I want to start it right away with highlighting that. And I think starting my paragraph in an interesting way is a fun way to add voice. So I'm going to say, long ago, and maybe even before the New World was discovered. Just because I'm learning all about the New World right now in social studies, I feel like that fits really well. Long ago, in a galaxy far away, before the New World was discovered, there were many Native American tribes in America. What else could I do here? I'm thinking that I could explain where they lived. Okay, because these are in New Jersey, but there are other tribes that are all over the place in America, because that's what my first sentence is. It's about multiple tribes. So maybe I could say there are many Native American tribes in America, my little revisions, living near, where were they living near? Oceans, rivers, we know they live near bodies of water, and forests. That's me painting a little bit more of a visual picture for my reader. So I always go back and reread what I have to make sure it makes sense. Long ago, before the New World was discovered, there were many Native American tribes in America living near oceans, rivers, and forests. Okay, right there, I've added a lot of extra information, and I've made my first sentence much more interesting. Now the next part goes into explaining that the Native Americans who lived in New Jersey were called the Lenape, which I think is an important sentence, and I'm going to leave it there. They lived there before the European explorers came. Okay? I don't want to focus too much on the explorers because that's not what I'm writing about. I'm writing about the Native Americans, so I'm going to leave that sentence alone. The Lenape had their own language, traditions, and customs. They used natural resources to survive. Okay, so that might be something that I want to add here. They used natural resources to survive, such as, and I can fill in the blanks. Why don't you try that in your notebook? Maybe name 2 or 3 natural resources that they use to survive. And that's me giving an example, which is another way of adding voice. And looking at the way this ends, they lived in tribes, the tribes were large. Here, they lived in tribes, the tribes were large. I think even combining those two sentences, they lived in tribes and the tribes were large, makes my sentence sound a little bit better. All Lenape needed the land to survive. That's how I'm going to end my paragraph there. If I go back to what you filled in, they use their natural resources to survive. You might have added things like rivers, animals, trees, forests, etc. So another way to add voice would be to give the example. One last time, let's read this over together, make sure it makes sense, and make sure it has improved. Long ago, before the New World was discovered, there were many Native American tribes in America, living near oceans, rivers, and forests. The Lenape were Native Americans who lived in New Jersey. They lived there before the European explorers came. The Lenape had their own language, traditions, and customs. They used natural resources to survive, such as rivers, animals, trees, and forests. They lived in tribes, and the tribes were large. All Lenape needed land to survive. Reading it back over to myself, I think it all makes sense. I explained more, and I made the paragraph sound better. And notice I didn't change every sentence. Adding voice does not mean changing them all. It just means adding a few keywords or phrases to make it sound better. Now it's your turn. You're going to go into your writing, and you're going to try to add at least 3 words or phrases that you think add voice to your writing and make it sound more interesting. Then what you're going to do is you're going to highlight those words and phrases so that when your teacher asks for them, it's really easy to see. You're going to try to do this throughout all of your writing pieces that you do this unit. Good luck and have fun.